The night was heavy with tension, the sort of quiet that always seemed to come right before a storm. Ryan Devereux, the millionaire businessman with an empire built on risk, sat at a high-end bar, swirling his drink absent-mindedly. His friends, clustered around him, had their eyes locked on him, waiting. They knew what was coming, and they knew he wouldn't back down. But even they couldn't predict how it would all end. Ryan, Brad, his closest friend, leaned in with a smirk. "You always take the biggest risks, but this one's a real gamble. Are you sure about it?" Ryan looked at him, his expression unreadable. "Of course. It's just a bet. A stupid one, maybe. But it's something I can win. Just wait." The challenge had been set: marry an obese woman, a woman most wouldn't even look at twice, and stay married to her for a year. The winner would get a hefty sum of money. But it wasn't just about the money. No, Ryan had something to prove. Something to everyone who had ever doubted him. And so, when the bet was made, no one could have predicted what would follow. The woman, Amanda, wasn't what most would call conventionally beautiful. She was in her early 30s, had struggled with her weight all her life, and had spent years trying to fight off the judgment of society. She'd learned to hold her head high despite the cruelty, despite the whispers, despite the way people looked at her like she didn't belong. When Ryan met her, he wasn't expecting anything more than what the bet had promised, a challenge. But something about her demeanor, her strength, and her unwillingness to shrink herself despite the weight of the world's gaze left him intrigued. It wasn't supposed to be anything more than a game. But Amanda wasn't playing by the same rules. Ryan, for the first time in his life, felt a flutter of doubt. He hadn't counted on this, a woman who was both confident and vulnerable in equal measure, someone who wasn't desperate for his money or attention. Someone who had already fought the hardest battles of her life. And yet, Ryan had no choice but to go through with it. The marriage was meant to be a formality, something that would satisfy the terms of the bet. But as the weeks passed, things started to change. Ryan began to notice the way Amanda moved through the world, the way people saw her, her resilience, her dignity. There was something captivating about her, something beyond the surface. But it wasn't just Amanda who had begun to change. Ryan found himself torn between the life he had built, one of luxury, status, and power, and the raw, human connection he was slowly discovering with this woman who had been nothing more than a pawn in his game. One night, after an argument that almost tore them apart, Amanda stood by the window, looking out into the dark, her silhouette framed by the city lights. Ryan watched her silently from the doorway, something strange stirring inside him. "Why are you still here?" he asked quietly. She didn't turn around. "Because I have nowhere else to go," she said simply, the words heavy with meaning. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. Was this just the game of a lifetime to him? Or was it becoming something far more complicated? The bet was supposed to end in a year, but neither of them knew what the year would bring. And the most shocking part was that neither of them knew what was coming next. Would Ryan walk away victorious, having proven his point? Or would Amanda, this woman he had underestimated, turn the tables on him in ways he couldn't have imagined? And as the first part of their journey began, one thing was clear: nothing was going according to plan. The clock was ticking, and Ryan Devereux had just stepped into a life he didn't know how to navigate. Amanda, on the other hand, was more than ready to face the next challenge that lay ahead. Ryan had always prided himself on being in control. His empire, a sprawling network of businesses, investments, and high-stakes deals, had been built on careful planning, strategic risks, and a cold, calculating mind. But none of his successes had prepared him for what was unfolding in his life now. He watched Amanda from across the room, sitting on the couch, her eyes flicking through a book, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her presence was magnetic, the way she seemed so completely at peace with herself, even in the chaos of their marriage. The strange thing was, it wasn't just her physical appearance that made her captivating, it was the depth in her eyes, the layers of history and experiences she carried with her, and the vulnerability that she never let show unless she chose to. He had initially thought she would be just a temporary distraction. A woman who could be used for the sake of a bet, someone he could easily manipulate, someone who didn't pose any real emotional threat to him. But as days turned into weeks, Ryan began to question his own motives. The bet was supposed to be a joke, a test of his arrogance, but it was quickly spiraling into something he wasn't sure how to control anymore. Their days followed an awkward rhythm at first. Amanda, polite and distant, kept to herself mostly. She didn't try to impress him, didn't demand his attention or approval. Ryan respected her for that, but at the same time, it irritated him. She didn't even seem to care about the luxuries of his world, the designer clothes, the expensive dinners, the life of privilege that he flaunted without thought. She was different from every woman he had ever known, and it both fascinated and frustrated him. One evening, as they sat across from each other at the dining table, Ryan noticed Amanda staring at her plate, picking at the food absent-mindedly. He could see the tension in her posture, the way her eyes remained focused on the dish in front of her, as if trying to avoid the inevitable. "Amanda," Ryan said, his voice low but purposeful. "Talk to me." She didn't look up. "About what?" Her tone was flat, defensive. "About everything." He leaned forward, his hand resting on the table, as if trying to break through the wall she had built around herself. "I don't understand you. Why are you here, really?" Amanda's fork clinked softly against the plate as she put it down, still not meeting his eyes. There was a silence between them, thick with unspoken thoughts. Ryan was starting to feel the weight of her quiet. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I'm here because you asked me to be. Because I'm part of your bet." Ryan's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as the bitterness in her words stung more than he expected. He hated the reminder of why they were even in this situation. But as the words hung in the air, he couldn't deny the truth. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about a real connection. It was just a deal, two people brought together by a reckless bet. "So, you're just going to play along?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of frustration. "I'm not playing along, Ryan," Amanda replied, her eyes finally meeting his. "I'm living my life. Whether you're here or not doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change the fact that I've fought my whole life to be seen, to be respected, not for the way I look, but for the person I am." Ryan felt the sting of her words, but it was more than that. There was something in her voice, something raw, something real that made him question everything. Her eyes, those deep, unwavering eyes, told him more than he could ever understand in one sitting. But at that moment, he wanted to. He wanted to understand her, wanted to know what made her tick, what had shaped her into the woman sitting across from him. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for," he muttered, his voice low. "I'm sorry." Amanda didn't respond at first. She just studied him, as if measuring whether his apology was genuine. After a long moment, she nodded slightly, as if deciding that this was as much as he could offer in that moment. "Thank you," she said quietly, before looking down again, the conversation seemingly over. But it wasn't over. Not for Ryan. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her, something hidden beneath the layers she carefully guarded. He couldn't stop wondering if she was playing him. If she was pretending to be something she wasn't. The next day. Ryan woke up the next morning, a dull ache in his head from the alcohol he'd consumed the night before. The night had ended in silence, and that was all that seemed to be left between him and Amanda now, silence. The tension had thickened overnight, and despite the truce of sorts they had reached the night before, he knew nothing had truly been resolved. He found her in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the scent of toast and eggs. It was a routine, one she followed without fail. Her movements were efficient, deliberate. It was as if she was in control of everything, while he, the man with the power, was at the mercy of a game he had no real control over. "You're up early," Ryan said, leaning against the doorway, watching her. Amanda glanced at him, offering a faint smile. I've always been an early riser. Ryan took a step inside, feeling the heaviness of the moment settle over him. You don't have to do this, you know. Amanda raised an eyebrow. Do what? Live this life. Play along with the bet. Ryan's voice was softer now, a little uncertain. I don't expect you to do anything you don't want to. I don't want you to think I'm forcing you into this. Amanda's gaze softened slightly, and for a moment, Ryan thought she might reveal something more. Something vulnerable, something raw. But she only shook her head. You didn't force me into anything, Ryan, she said. I've been forced to live my life on my own terms, for better or worse. And I'm here because I chose to be. The bet was never the issue. It's what happens after that matters. Ryan took a step toward her, his mind racing. She was right. What happened after? What would happen when the bet was over? As the days passed, things between them grew more complicated. The walls they had built around themselves slowly began to crumble, but with each crack, a new challenge emerged. Their connection, if one could even call it that, was tested time and time again. And the questions only grew. What did Amanda want from him? Was he willing to give? And most importantly, what would happen when the bet ended? Could he walk away, leaving her behind as if nothing had changed? Or was something deeper, more meaningful, pulling them toward each other? The days were blending together now. Ryan had stopped counting the weeks since the bet had started, the days passing in an almost dreamlike haze. What began as a simple agreement, a game of ego and challenge, was now something far more complicated, something Ryan wasn't sure how to navigate. He found himself constantly distracted by Amanda, her presence taking up more and more space in his mind, in his thoughts. It wasn't just her physicality, though her size had caught his attention at first, it was the way she carried herself, her quiet strength, the way she seemed to exist in the world without needing anyone's validation. Ryan had always been used to people bending to his will, people admiring him, wanting something from him. But Amanda was different. She didn't need him, didn't want his approval. It was unsettling. The more he tried to understand her, the more she slipped through his fingers, like sand caught in a stiff breeze. Amanda's silence, her evasiveness, had started to affect him more than he expected. It was as if every time he thought he understood her, a new layer would emerge, one he wasn't prepared for. The evening of revelations. It was a cold evening when the atmosphere in the house shifted. Ryan had been working in his office when Amanda came to him unexpectedly. Her presence, once calming, was now tinged with an undercurrent of tension. I need to talk to you, she said quietly, standing in the doorway of his office. The usual composure in her voice had faltered. Ryan instantly stood up, sensing the urgency. What is it? He asked, trying to mask the worry that crept into his tone. Amanda didn't speak immediately, her eyes darting around the room, avoiding his gaze. Ryan noticed how tight her jaw had become, how her hands gripped the fabric of her sweater in a way that suggested something more than just casual conversation. There was something different about her tonight, something more real, more vulnerable. For the first time, he realized that she wasn't just playing the part of his wife in this bet, there was a person here, with real emotions, real fears, and a life far more complicated than he could have ever imagined. She finally met his gaze, her eyes dark, haunted. I never wanted this, she said. I never wanted to be part of your game. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. He had heard her frustrations before, had seen the flickers of anger behind her usually calm demeanor, but this was something different. This wasn't just disappointment in him, it was something deeper, something more personal. I don't understand, Ryan murmured, stepping closer to her. I thought you were okay with this. I thought you were playing along. Amanda shook her head, her face pale in the dim light. I wasn't playing along, Ryan. I had no choice but to go along with your bet. But it was never about that. It was never about what you think of me or the money. It was about survival. About getting by, about protecting myself from people like you. Ryan's confusion deepened. People like me? His voice was thick with a mix of anger and hurt. What do you mean by that? Amanda finally took a step back, crossing her arms as if she was trying to protect herself from the weight of her own words. You think I married you for the money, for the fame, for anything that you have to offer, she said, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. But you don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've been through. Ryan stared at her, the pieces of the puzzle starting to shift into place but still too blurry to see clearly. He had assumed that Amanda's life had been simple. After all, she was just another woman who had been part of his bet. She was the one who seemed so content to be left out of the spotlight, to remain in the background. But now, he realized he had underestimated her, he had underestimated the weight of her words. What are you trying to say? Ryan asked, his voice quieter now. Amanda took a deep breath, and for the first time since they had met, she allowed herself to speak without holding back. I've spent my whole life being judged by the way I look, by the way people perceive me. I've been called every name in the book, pushed aside, ignored, made to feel like I'm not worthy of anything. So when this bet came along, I thought it would be just one more thing. One more way to prove that I could make it through. But the truth is, I don't want to keep pretending. I don't want to keep hiding behind the mask of this bet, of this game. It's exhausting. Ryan was stunned, his mind racing to comprehend the magnitude of what Amanda had just revealed. He had never considered the weight of her experiences, the battles she had fought long before he ever entered her life. Why didn't you tell me this before? Ryan asked, his voice tinged with frustration and regret. Amanda looked away, her shoulders tense. Because I couldn't. Because if I had, you wouldn't have cared. You were too focused on winning the bet, on your own pride. But now, things are different. There was a long pause. Ryan felt as if the world around him had tilted off its axis, and he was struggling to catch his balance. The bet, the money, the game, it all seemed so trivial now. The stakes were far higher than he could have ever realized. The aftermath. The rest of that night was a blur for Ryan. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. His mind replayed Amanda's words over and over again, each time more unsettling than the last. He had thought he knew her, but now he realized how little he understood. The woman sitting in front of him wasn't just an object of his bet. She was someone who had endured years of pain, rejection, and heartbreak. She was someone who had fought for survival in a world that had constantly tried to tear her down. Ryan found himself staring out the window, the city lights flickering in the distance, casting a pale glow across the room. He didn't know what to do. His emotions were a tangle of guilt, confusion, and a strange sense of admiration for Amanda's strength. He had come into this marriage with the intention of winning a bet, of proving something to his friends, to the world. But now, he saw everything through a different lens. The next morning, Amanda was gone. She had packed her things without a word, leaving a note behind in the kitchen. The note was simple, but the words were seared into Ryan's mind. I can't keep doing this, Ryan. I can't be part of your game anymore. This isn't just a bet. It's my life, and I deserve more than that. Goodbye. The finality of her departure hit him like a ton of bricks. He had no idea where she had gone, no way to reach her. All he had were the remnants of the life they had built together in a matter of weeks, a life that had now unraveled in the span of a single night. Ryan couldn't help but feel a profound sense of loss. He had pushed her away when he should have tried to understand her. He had let his pride blind him to her pain. And now, she was gone. Searching for answers. Ryan's life had always been about control, about winning. But in that moment, he realized he had lost something far more important than the bet. He had lost Amanda, her trust, her friendship, and possibly the chance to discover what truly mattered in life. Determined to make things right, Ryan began searching for her. He used all the resources at his disposal, his connections, his influence, but it was like she had disappeared into thin air. He couldn't find any trace of her, and every attempt to reach her only led to dead ends. Weeks passed. His obsession grew. He couldn't stop thinking about Amanda, wondering where she was, what she was doing, if she was okay. He had no idea if she would ever come back, but one thing was clear: this bet, this game, had changed everything. And Ryan wasn't sure if he could ever go back to the life he had known before. Weeks had passed since Amanda left, and Ryan's world had turned upside down. The silence in the house was deafening, the empty spaces where she once was a constant reminder of his mistakes. The grand estate, once a symbol of his success, now felt hollow and lifeless. The work that had once consumed him no longer held his attention. His mind was constantly preoccupied with thoughts of her, where she might be, how she was coping, and whether she would ever forgive him. He had tried everything he could think of to find Amanda. Private investigators, discreet inquiries through mutual acquaintances, even reaching out to her family, but all to no avail. It was as if she had disappeared completely. And the more time passed, the more desperate Ryan became. The weight of the situation was suffocating. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Each day felt like an endless stretch of empty time. He had lost more than just Amanda, he had lost his sense of purpose, his clarity. The thought of continuing his life without her, without resolving the tension between them, was unbearable. A reluctant revelation. It was late one evening when Ryan's phone buzzed with a message. The number was unfamiliar, but the message wasn't. It was a single sentence that sent a chill down his spine. "I know where she is." The words lingered in his mind for what felt like an eternity. His heart pounded in his chest, his hands trembling as he quickly typed back, his thoughts racing. "Who is this? What do you mean you know where she is?" The reply came almost instantly. "I'm someone who knows Amanda. And I know you're looking for her." Ryan didn't waste a second. He was out the door in minutes, making his way to the address the mysterious message had provided. He couldn't believe it. Was this a chance? Was it finally happening, finally an opportunity to fix the mess he had made? To find Amanda, to apologize, to make things right? But as he drove through the city streets, a creeping sense of unease settled over him. Something didn't feel right. Who was this person, really? And why were they offering to help him? Ryan had been so consumed by his guilt and regret that he hadn't questioned the intentions of this mysterious person. The meeting. The address led him to a quiet, nondescript building on the outskirts of town, far from the world of wealth and privilege he was accustomed to. The area was unfamiliar, and the street was dimly lit, casting long shadows across the pavement. Ryan parked his car, his hands still shaking as he approached the entrance. He knocked on the door, his mind racing with questions. Moments later, the door opened, revealing a woman. She was older than Amanda, with dark hair streaked with silver, but there was something in her eyes that immediately reminded Ryan of the woman he had lost. It was a look of quiet strength, a sense of having seen too much and still managing to stand tall. "You must be Ryan," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Come in." Ryan stepped inside, unsure of what to expect. The room was small, cluttered with books, papers, and a sense of lived-in comfort. He could tell immediately that this was not the life Amanda had led while they were together. This was a different world, one that felt more authentic, more real. "I'm Sarah," the woman introduced herself, gesturing for him to sit. "I know what you've been going through. I know what you're looking for." Ryan's anxiety flared. "Where is she? Is she okay?" Sarah gave him a soft but sad smile. "Amanda's fine. But you need to understand, she's not just gone because of your bet. It's deeper than that." Ryan sat forward, his breath catching. "What do you mean?" What's deeper than that? Sarah looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and something else, anger, perhaps, or even resentment. Amanda has been through a lot more than you realize, Ryan. She wasn't just some woman in your bet. You didn't know the first thing about her. Not really. Ryan's heart sank. I didn't know. I thought I was helping her. I thought she was just playing along. Sarah shook her head, her expression darkening. That's exactly the problem. You thought. You never took the time to really know her, to understand what she's been through. And that's why she left. Ryan's mind reeled. What happened? What did I miss? Sarah took a deep breath, as if preparing herself to tell a story that was long overdue. Amanda's been dealing with more than just people judging her for her weight. She's been dealing with years of manipulation, abuse, and betrayal. Her family has never treated her like she was enough. Her whole life, she's been forced to be someone she's not. She thought this bet with you would be another way to prove herself, to survive another day in a world that doesn't see her for who she truly is. Ryan's stomach churned. He hadn't known. He hadn't understood. All the assumptions he had made, all the moments where he thought he could control the situation, were meaningless in the face of the reality that Sarah was revealing to him. You don't understand. I didn't mean to hurt her, Ryan stammered. I didn't know. Sarah sighed, her eyes softening as she looked at him. You have to understand something, Ryan. You weren't the first person to play with her life. You weren't the first person to manipulate her. But you might be the one to make it right. Ryan's chest tightened as the weight of her words settled in. He had been the one to push her away, to reduce her to a bet, to a game. And now, he was being told that it wasn't too late, that there was still a chance to make things right. But where is she? Ryan asked, his voice pleading now. I need to find her. I need to apologize. I need to fix this. Sarah paused, then stood up slowly, walking over to a desk in the corner of the room. She picked up a small envelope and handed it to Ryan. I can't tell you exactly where she is. But she left this for you. When she's ready, she'll come back. Ryan took the envelope, his hands shaking as he opened it. Inside was a letter, written in Amanda's familiar handwriting. He unfolded it with trembling fingers, the words inside more powerful than anything he could have ever imagined. I don't expect you to understand, Ryan. But I need you to know that I'm leaving for a while. I need time to find myself, to heal from everything I've been through. The bet was never about the money. It was about survival. But I can't keep pretending anymore. Maybe one day you'll understand what I've been through. Maybe one day, you'll see me for who I really am. Until then, goodbye. Ryan read the letter over and over, the weight of Amanda's words sinking into his soul. This wasn't just about her leaving, it was about him coming to terms with everything he had done wrong, everything he had taken for granted. The long road ahead. As Ryan stood there, holding the letter in his hands, he realized the magnitude of the journey ahead. The road to redemption would not be easy. He had a long way to go before he could earn back Amanda's trust, or even understand what he had done to lose it in the first place. But one thing was clear, he couldn't go back to the life he had known. The bet, the wealth, the power, it all seemed so meaningless now in the face of Amanda's truth. She wasn't just a pawn in his game. She was a person with a history, with pain, and with dreams of her own. And Ryan was determined to spend the rest of his life making sure that when she returned, he would be the man she deserved. If he ever had that chance again. Weeks turned into months. The house, once filled with the sounds of laughter and tension, now stood in eerie silence. Ryan's life had been reduced to a monotonous rhythm of work, sleepless nights, and reflection. He was haunted by Amanda's letter, the simple yet profound words that seemed to echo in his mind, leaving him with an overwhelming sense of guilt and self-doubt. He had always been a man of power, a man who thrived on control. But now, nothing seemed in his grasp. The bet, the money, the fleeting victories, all of it had paled in comparison to the reality that Amanda had revealed to him. The mistakes he had made, the assumptions he had held, the arrogance that had dictated his life, it was all clear now, in a way that was impossible to ignore. Ryan had tried everything to distract himself. He'd thrown himself into work, into the business deals that used to drive him. But no matter how many contracts he signed, no matter how many deals were struck, the emptiness lingered. He couldn't escape the truth. He had pushed away the only person who had ever challenged him, the only person who had ever made him question his own worth. The first step toward redemption. It was a rainy afternoon when Ryan decided to take his first real step toward redemption. He had spent hours poring over his past actions, over every conversation he had with Amanda, every moment where he had missed the signs. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how little he had truly seen her. She hadn't been a trophy in his bet. She had been a woman with a story, with emotions, with dreams, and he had ignored them all. Ryan was determined to find her, not just to apologize, but to show her that he was capable of change. The man he had been, selfish, blind, and ignorant, was someone he no longer wanted to be. But how could he prove that to Amanda? How could he make amends for the hurt he had caused? He called Sarah, the woman who had helped him understand Amanda's past. The conversation was difficult, but Ryan knew it was necessary. He had to confront his own role in this tragedy, in Amanda's pain, and he needed guidance. "Sarah, I need to know where she is," Ryan said, his voice desperate. "I have to fix this. I have to make things right." Sarah's voice on the other end of the line was calm, yet guarded. "Ryan, you can't force someone to come back. If Amanda wants to return, she will. But you need to understand that the road to fixing things isn't easy. It's about more than just saying, 'I'm sorry.' It's about understanding who you've been and who you're becoming." Ryan's grip on the phone tightened. "I know. I'm ready. I'm ready to change. Please, tell me what I can do to find her." There was a pause before Sarah spoke again. "She's in a small town outside the city. She started over, Ryan. She's rebuilding her life. But she doesn't need you to fix it for her. She needs you to understand what she's been through." Ryan felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. He finally had a lead, but the weight of what he had to do next felt overwhelming. The journey to find her. Ryan drove for hours, the rain still pouring down, blurring the world outside. He didn't know what to expect when he arrived in the small town, but his heart raced with both hope and fear. This wasn't just a search for Amanda, it was a search for his own redemption. He had to face the consequences of his actions, not just as a man seeking forgiveness, but as someone who had never truly understood the impact of his decisions on the people around him. The small town was nothing like the world Ryan was used to. It was quiet, the streets lined with simple houses and small businesses. There was no glitz, no glamour. It was the kind of place where people worked hard, lived simple lives, and didn't care about fame or wealth. In many ways, it was the opposite of everything Ryan had known. He asked around at a local coffee shop, showing a photo of Amanda to anyone who might recognize her. The response was mixed. Some people didn't know her, others had seen her but hadn't spoken to her. It was clear that Amanda had made a clean break from the life she had once known, and Ryan couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt at the thought of her walking away from everything to escape the chaos he had unknowingly caused. But then, after hours of searching, he found someone who knew her. An older woman in a bookstore had seen Amanda recently, and she offered a small clue: she's been coming here often. You might find her at the park later. Ryan thanked her, his heart pounding in his chest. He rushed to the park, praying that he wasn't too late. The encounter. It was nearly dusk when Ryan reached the park, the sun beginning to set in the distance. The park was peaceful, with only a few people scattered across the walking paths. Ryan walked slowly, his eyes scanning the area, until he finally saw her. Amanda. She was sitting on a bench, her face turned slightly toward the setting sun, her posture relaxed but thoughtful. She looked different. She was still the same woman he had married, but there was a quiet strength about her now, a sense of peace that hadn't been there before. It was as if the time away from him had allowed her to find herself in a way that he had never seen. Ryan's heart stopped for a moment as he took a step forward, but he didn't know what to say. Words seemed insufficient for everything that had passed between them, for everything he had failed to understand. Amanda turned her head slightly when she heard him approach, but she didn't stand. She didn't say anything. It was as if she had known he would come, but wasn't sure how to respond. Ryan took a deep breath, finally breaking the silence. "Amanda," he said softly, his voice filled with regret. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I was blind to what you were going through. I was selfish. I thought this was just a game, just a bet, and I never saw you for who you truly are." Amanda's eyes met his, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Ryan saw vulnerability in her gaze. But there was no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet sadness. "I know you're sorry," she said after a long pause. "But it's not enough to just say it, Ryan. It's never been enough to just say it." Ryan nodded, understanding now that words couldn't undo what had been done. "I know," he replied. "But I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to prove that I can change. Not for the bet. Not for the money. But for you." Amanda stood slowly, her eyes still holding his. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said softly. "But I see that you're trying. That's a start." Ryan's heart swelled with a mixture of hope and fear. He didn't know what the future held, whether Amanda would ever come back into his life, but he knew one thing for sure, this was just the beginning of a long road ahead. And this time, he wasn't going to make the same mistakes. It had been several weeks since Ryan's encounter with Amanda in the park. The initial moments of hope, of seeing her again and speaking from the heart, had been overwhelming. But since that day, things had settled into an uneasy silence. Amanda had not reached out to him, and Ryan had not pushed. For the first time in his life, he was learning the value of patience, of giving someone space, especially when it came to someone as important as Amanda. Ryan spent his days immersed in self-reflection, trying to undo the damage of his past actions. He was a man who had always prided himself on control, but now, he was learning what it truly meant to let go. The life he had once led, one of wealth, power, and a sense of superiority, seemed more and more like a distant memory. None of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was what came next. The future was uncertain, but it was the only thing he could focus on now. As for Amanda, she had returned to her quiet life in the small town. She was beginning to heal, to find peace in the absence of the chaos that had once consumed her. But the pain of the past, the years of feeling worthless, the constant judgment from others, the betrayal of people she had loved, was not something she could simply forget. She had started a new life, but her heart still carried the weight of those old wounds. Ryan knew he couldn't expect her to forgive him overnight. He knew it would take time, and maybe even years, before she could truly trust him again. But he was willing to do whatever it took. He had spent too many years controlling everything around him. Now, he was learning that control over himself was the hardest battle of all. A call from the past. It was one afternoon when Ryan's phone rang, breaking the quiet routine of his day. He recognized the number immediately. It was Sarah. He had kept in touch with her since his meeting with Amanda, hoping for any updates, any sign that Amanda might be willing to talk. He picked up the phone quickly, his heart racing. "Sarah, what's going on?" Ryan's voice was tight with anticipation. "She's been asking about you," Sarah said. "Amanda wants to see you. She's not sure if she's ready yet, but she wants to meet again. She wants to know if you're serious about making amends. About showing her that you've changed." Ryan's heart leapt in his chest. Where? When? She'll meet you at the park tomorrow, Sarah replied. But don't think this is going to be easy, Ryan. She's still hurting. She's still figuring things out. You need to be prepared for that. Ryan nodded, despite Sarah not being able to see him. I understand. I'll be there. Thank you. As he hung up the phone, a mix of excitement and fear flooded over him. Tomorrow. Tomorrow he would see Amanda again. The thought filled him with a sense of urgency. There was so much he needed to say, so much to prove, but he knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. The journey of rebuilding their relationship wasn't something he could rush. It would take time, trust, and consistent action. A step toward forgiveness. The following day, Ryan arrived at the park early, his mind racing with every possible outcome. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. He knew that Amanda's forgiveness, if it came at all, would be hard-earned. But as he sat on a bench waiting for her, he found himself feeling calmer than he had in weeks. The fear that had once dominated his thoughts was slowly being replaced by a quiet resolve. He had nothing left to hide, nothing left to prove except that he was truly ready to change. Amanda arrived just as the sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden light over the park. She walked toward him slowly, her movements graceful but hesitant. Her eyes met his briefly, and for a moment, Ryan saw something in them, something fragile, yet determined. He knew she had been through so much, and that her decision to come here, to face him again, was a huge step for her. She stopped a few feet away, not sitting down, but standing tall. She looked at him for a long time, as if searching for something in his face. Ryan, she finally said, her voice quiet but steady, I've been thinking a lot about everything. About what happened between us. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. But I do know that I need to understand why you did what you did. Why you thought it was okay to treat me the way you did. Ryan swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had anticipated this moment, but now that it was here, he found himself at a loss for words. How could he explain the arrogance, the ignorance, the selfishness that had defined his past? How could he ever make her understand that the man who had treated her like a bet was no longer the man standing in front of her? I don't have an excuse for what I did, Ryan said, his voice raw. I was blind, selfish, and arrogant. I thought I knew everything, and I thought I could control everything, including you. And I was wrong. I never saw you for who you truly are. I only saw you as a part of my game, a way to prove something to myself. But now, I know how wrong I was. I've spent every day since realizing just how much I hurt you. And I can't undo that, no matter how hard I try. But I want you to know that I'm not the same person anymore. I'm not the man who made that bet. I'm someone who understands now. I'm someone who's trying to change. Amanda was silent for a long time, her eyes searching his face. Ryan stood there, waiting, as the seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. He could see the inner struggle in her eyes, the pain, the distrust, but also something else. Something that looked like hope. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Ryan, Amanda finally said, her voice wavering. But I need to believe that people can change. I need to believe that I'm not the only one who deserves a second chance. Ryan's heart swelled. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I'm here. I'm willing to do the work, whatever it takes. I'll prove it to you. I'll prove it to myself. Amanda looked down for a moment, taking a deep breath before meeting his gaze again. I'm not asking for your apology, Ryan. What I'm asking is for you to show me that you're different. That you're someone who can be trusted. That you're someone who can see me for who I really am. Ryan nodded solemnly. I can do that. I'll show you, Amanda. I won't give up. She turned to leave, but then paused and looked over her shoulder. I'm not ready to come back into your life yet, Ryan. But, maybe we can start with being honest with each other. Maybe that's a good place to begin. Ryan watched as she walked away, her figure disappearing into the distance. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that this was a turning point. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. A long journey, filled with uncertainty, but also the possibility of healing. The days that followed Ryan's meeting with Amanda were both agonizing and enlightening. Amanda had asked for honesty, and that was exactly what Ryan had promised. But now, with her words echoing in his mind, he was forced to confront the most difficult question of all: could he truly be honest with himself? Ryan spent the next few weeks doing exactly what he had promised. He stopped hiding behind the walls of his wealth, his status, and his achievements. Instead, he took long walks in the park where he had met Amanda, reflecting on his past actions, the mistakes he had made, and the pain he had caused. Every day, he tried to break down the pieces of himself that had been built on arrogance and pride. It wasn't easy. There were moments when he wanted to give up, when the weight of guilt was almost too much to bear. But he kept going, determined to prove to Amanda that he could be someone worthy of her trust. Meanwhile, Amanda, though distant, had begun her own journey of healing. She kept herself busy with her new life, finding solace in the quiet routine she had built for herself. But the wounds of the past didn't heal as quickly as she had hoped. Every now and then, she would find herself remembering the hurt, the loneliness, and the feeling of being an object in Ryan's bet. The scars she carried weren't easily erased. It was clear that her emotional journey was far from over. Even though she had agreed to give Ryan a chance to prove himself, Amanda still kept her distance. She wasn't ready to open her heart again, not fully. She was afraid of getting hurt again, afraid that Ryan's change was just a temporary phase, a desperate attempt to fix something that couldn't be fixed. And yet, deep down, she hoped, just a little, that maybe he was sincere. Reaching out. It was a crisp morning when Ryan received a text message from Amanda. His heart raced as he saw her name appear on his phone. It had been days since they had spoken, and he knew that this could be a pivotal moment in their fragile relationship. He opened the message quickly, his hands slightly trembling. "Can we meet again? I think we need to talk." Ryan didn't hesitate. He immediately texted back, asking when and where. He knew that this was his chance to prove that he had changed, to show Amanda that he was more than the man who had made the bet. They agreed to meet at a local cafe. It was a neutral space, one that didn't carry the weight of their past. When Ryan arrived, he was early, as always, eager to make a good impression. He sat at a table by the window, looking out at the street, his thoughts racing. He didn't know what Amanda would say, but he was prepared for anything. This wasn't just about apologizing anymore. It was about proving that he had changed, that he was ready to be the kind of man who could stand beside her as an equal, not as someone who sought to control or manipulate. When Amanda walked in, Ryan's breath caught in his chest. She looked different. There was a softness to her that he hadn't seen before, a calmness in her expression. She had always been beautiful, but now, there was something more, something deeper. She was no longer the woman who had been trapped in his bet. She was a woman who had found herself, and it was a sight that made Ryan feel both awe and regret. Amanda sat down across from him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was as if both of them were waiting for the other to make the first move, unsure of how to navigate the fragile terrain they were now walking. Finally, Amanda broke the silence. "Ryan, I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us. And about you." She paused, looking at him carefully. "I want to believe that you've changed. I want to believe that you're different now. But the truth is, I don't know if I can trust you again." Ryan's heart sank, but he kept his composure. This was the moment of truth. He had prepared himself for rejection, but hearing Amanda's words still cut deeply. "I understand," he said quietly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. And I don't expect you to trust me right away. I've lost that privilege. But I'm asking for a chance to show you that I'm not the same person I was before. I've spent every day since we last met working on myself, learning from my mistakes. I know it's not enough to say that, I have to prove it. Amanda looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words carefully. And how do you plan on proving it, Ryan? I don't have all the answers, Ryan admitted. But I know that actions speak louder than words. I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to show you that I can be the person you deserve. Not just for you, but for myself. Amanda studied him for a moment longer, then looked away, her gaze shifting to the coffee cup in front of her. I've spent so much of my life feeling like I wasn't enough. Like I had to change, to be someone else, just to be loved or accepted. But the truth is, I've spent so much time fighting for approval from others that I forgot to fight for myself. She looked back at Ryan, her eyes softening. And I don't know if I'm ready to let anyone into my life again, especially you. Ryan nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. I don't expect you to make any decisions today, Amanda. I just want you to know that I'm here. I'm here for as long as it takes, if you're willing to give me a chance. Amanda's gaze softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she offered him a faint smile. I'm not sure what the future holds, Ryan. But maybe we can start over. Maybe we can take it slow. I'm not ready for anything beyond that. Ryan felt a rush of relief, but also a new sense of determination. I can wait. I'll wait for as long as it takes. The two of them sat in silence for a while, both unsure of what the future would bring, but also realizing that the past didn't have to define them. They had both been through so much, but perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a chance for healing, for forgiveness, and for something more than what had once been. A glimmer of hope. The days following their meeting were filled with cautious optimism. Ryan respected Amanda's space, giving her the time she needed to figure out what she wanted. He kept his promise, he was present, but not pushy, and he continued to work on himself, making the necessary changes that would ensure he could be a better man, not just for Amanda, but for the person he had always needed to become. Amanda, in turn, found herself slowly opening up. She had been hesitant, afraid of being hurt again, but something about Ryan's sincerity, his willingness to truly change, made her question her own fears. She wasn't ready to leap back into a relationship, but she was ready to take small steps. They started meeting for coffee once a week, talking about everything and nothing at all. It was a slow process, but it was progress. For the first time in a long while, Amanda felt a glimmer of hope. Not just for her own future, but for the possibility of a future with Ryan, one that was built on mutual respect, honesty, and the willingness to truly see each other for who they were, flaws and all. And as for Ryan, he had learned the most important lesson of all, that real change takes time, that redemption isn't instantaneous, and that the journey toward healing and forgiveness is one that requires patience, humility, and a willingness to face the hardest parts of yourself. They had both come so far, but the road ahead was still long. But this time, they were walking it together, one small step at a time. The weeks that followed Ryan and Amanda's last meeting were a whirlwind of small moments. There was no grand gesture, no sudden declarations of love. Instead, there were quiet steps, conversations over coffee, slow but meaningful gestures of care, and an honest, often painful, examination of the past. They were both learning that the path to healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and days when it felt easier to walk away than to continue. But despite the challenges, there was something unmistakable in the air between them. A change. It was subtle, like the first light of dawn breaking through the darkness. Neither of them had expected this to be easy, but they had both found themselves committed to the process, even when the road was long and uncertain. A pivotal moment. It was a rainy afternoon when Ryan found himself standing in front of Amanda's apartment. They had been taking things slow, but today felt different. There was something about the weather, the heaviness of the clouds, and the quiet stillness of the world around them that made Ryan feel like he couldn't wait any longer. He had something important to say. He had spent days trying to find the right words, practicing in his head, but now that he was here, standing at her door, nothing seemed quite right. He was nervous, more nervous than he had been in years. What if she wasn't ready? What if he was pushing too hard? As he raised his hand to knock, the door opened before he could even touch the wood. Amanda stood there, her expression calm but expectant. She had changed, too. Her eyes were no longer filled with the same guarded caution, but a warmth that he hadn't seen before. The hurt was still there, but it was no longer the dominant emotion. "Ryan," she said softly, stepping aside to let him in. "You're early." "I needed to see you," he said, his voice hoarse. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've been through. And there's something I need to say. Something that I've been holding back, but I can't keep it in anymore." Amanda looked at him curiously, her expression unreadable. "What is it?" Ryan took a deep breath, then spoke from the heart. "I know that I've made mistakes, so many mistakes. I hurt you in ways that I'll never fully be able to take back. But I've learned that love isn't just about feeling good or having someone there when it's easy. Love is about honesty, and trust, and growth. It's about two people being willing to face the darkest parts of themselves and still choose to walk forward together, no matter what. And I want to walk that road with you, Amanda. I want to prove that I'm worthy of your trust, your love, if you'll let me. I can't change the past, but I can work every day to build a future we both deserve." Amanda's eyes softened, and she stepped closer to him. There was no dramatic reaction, no grand speech. But in that moment, Ryan saw it, a flicker of hope in her eyes, a sign that she had finally begun to believe, just a little, that maybe he was telling the truth. Weighing his words, then nodded. "All right. One step at a time." The final lesson. That night, as Ryan lay in bed, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't sure where this journey would take him and Amanda. There were still obstacles to overcome, moments of doubt that would inevitably arise. But for the first time, he understood that the process of change was just that, a process. There was no shortcut, no quick fix. It wasn't about grand gestures or promises that were too big to keep. It was about consistency, about showing up every day, ready to grow and learn, both individually and together. And Amanda, too, had learned something. She had learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, it was about accepting it, acknowledging the pain, and choosing to move forward anyway. She had learned to trust herself, to honor her own worth, and to understand that love wasn't something that could be controlled or manipulated. It had to be earned. But it was also something that could be given freely, once the wounds had healed enough to allow it. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but they both knew one thing: they were no longer walking it alone. They had found each other again, not in the way they had once imagined, but in a way that felt more real, more grounded. They were no longer bound by the mistakes of the past, but by the promise of what the future could be, a future built on trust, forgiveness, and the kind of love that didn't need to be perfect to be real. As Ryan closed his eyes that night, a thought lingered in his mind. It wasn't the future that held the answers. It was the present, the choices they made each day, the small moments of connection, the steps they took to rebuild. One step at a time. The road forward. In the months that followed, Ryan and Amanda continued their journey, one that was filled with setbacks and progress, pain and healing. They learned to communicate better, to truly listen to one another, and to trust that they were both capable of growing and changing. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, it felt possible. And in that possibility, there was hope. As they stood together one evening, looking out at the sunset, Amanda turned to Ryan with a soft smile. "We're not perfect," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "But maybe that's okay." Ryan smiled back, taking her hand in his. "Maybe that's more than enough." And in that moment, they both knew that whatever the future held, they had already begun to create something beautiful, a life built on truth, understanding, and the courage to keep moving forward, together.